When so many fantasy series have ruined their potential for good storytelling with a wasteful emphasis on sexiness and shallow teen romance, is The Wheel of Time finally the show to break the mold? Well, stick around and I will share my thoughts. I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. This is my uncut review of The Wheel of Time, Amazon series premiere, episodes 1 through 3. The synopsis on IMDb reads, set in a high fantasy world where magic exists but only some can access it, a woman named Moraine crosses paths with 5 young men and women. This sparks a dangerous, world-spanning journey, based on the series by Robert Jordan. Now, I tried reading the first book in this series decades ago. I just could not get past what seemed like pages and pages on end describing ornate doorknobs in every room that the characters visited and countless other irrelevant details. I really wanted to love these books because I love lengthy fantasy book series made up of big, thick novels like the Shannara series and especially the Sword of Truth series, but I just never felt like I could enjoy Jordan's writing. So hearing about this series being made brought me to hope that I might be able to finally enjoy this series in at least some small way, even though, of course, it would undoubtedly go through lots of changes and not be pure, in the sense that I'm sure big fans would like it to be. But what does this thing feel like? What's the basic vibe of this animal? It's similar to, I think, the classic Lord of the Rings skeleton. You know, you've got a dark evil from the ancient past that's rising again, and only a few who don't realize their great potential can venture out into the world, the unknown wider world that they're naively unaware of, in order to fulfill their destiny and save the world. So it's that kind of coming-of-age kind of quest. Even though the hobbits were kind of adults, it was still a coming-of-age, seeing the wider world and being forced to grow up really fast kind of story. The first episode felt just a little bit slow. After the first scene, it starts with a cool action scene, kind of, or a suspenseful type thing, and then it kind of it gets quiet for a little while, taking time and setting up characters, but it does it in ways that really did ultimately pay off for me as the series continues to focus on and develop those characters, which is a really high value for me in all the fiction that I take in. Love character-driven, character-oriented stuff. There's a romance that's left in this awkward place because of dramatic changes in circumstance. There's a man who's living with horrible, tragic guilt in relationship to a lost loved one. Another has to overcome a troubled, dysfunctional upbringing and his own selfish tendencies as he's now being called up to this greater and more noble purpose. And of course, there's action and there's combat with snarling monsters and spectacular, powerful magic. There's epic journeying through beautiful landscapes, majestically captured with aerial cameras. There's even a touch of D&D looting that scratched a little itch for me I wasn't expecting, as one character encounters 1 or 2 interesting artifacts that they acquire along the way. As far as the cast goes, it's the core cast is these 4 20-something, well, 5, I guess, ultimately 20-somethings, and I've seen that so many times before in other fantasy shows that I expected them to basically be cast because they're beautiful and not much more. But I'm happy to say that this show doesn't seem interested in merely giving us characters who pose like models and do little else that's engaging. Now, it's not that I think that the acting is stellar here, but it's solid, and I think that there's potential. I mean, I feel like some of the basic emotions, the basic situations that they've been performing have not really tested what could be the range of their acting ability. And so, but I mean, they're off to a really solid start as far as I'm concerned. And them even just being solid, minus shallow CW sexiness, sadly feels like a significant achievement for this genre. So I'm pretty happy with that. Rosamund Pike plays the magic-using Moraine, kind of the senior mentor almost kind of character that comes into this small village and alerts these 4 20-somethings that they have a destiny and they need to come with her, So she's kind of the Gandalf, I guess, of this crew. And Rosamund Pike also produces the series, and she's played characters in the past that I just hate. I was like, since seeing Gone Girl and watching that one all the way to the end, I was enraged at the end of that movie, crying out, "Justice! Where's the justice?" You know? And I think she's played a couple other characters that are kind of snooty or snobby or something. They just rubbed me the wrong way, and I was like, oh man, I just get a bad vibe when I see her come into a scene. I don't know if she's going to be able to be someone that I like at all. And although her character is complex and so isn't just like straightforward likable, certainly not in the Gandalf type sense, I don't hate her. I find her character intriguing, both because of the writing and because of Pike's performance. And so I definitely want to see more. I'm not put off like I have been by her characters and her and the way she performs them, which I think are signs of a good actor, you know. But even so, this is a nice change of pace in my personal interaction with her work. So she's a good anchor for the show for me, even though she's largely, you know, just an equal member of the ensemble cast. Okay, stunts and visuals. There are a few CG environments and creature effects that have that sign of CG that my eyeballs are just cursed to notice, but many environments are environmental shots, are natural and sweepingly beautiful in the way they're captured, and even the creatures seem to be executed using a combination of practical and CG effects that work really well much of the time. And oh my gosh, thank you, Wheel of Time and Amazon, for the visible magic that just looks spectacular without looking silly or cartoony. Ever since, you know, Lord of the Rings was just such this wonderful filmmaking experience on so many levels, but yet the magic was largely invisible, especially in that fight between the two wizards in the first or second movie, whenever that was. I was just like, oh my gosh, no, I want to see the purple energies flying and swirling around and stuff. You know, I want to see freaking visible magic, man. And I didn't get it. And so seeing it here, outside of, you know, a fantasy movie or series that's made for kids or young adults or whatever, you know, seeing it here, taken seriously, really appreciated it. The magic hits like a hurricane in this world, and the visuals sell its power and mystery extremely well for me. All right, so themes. Is there anything of moral, philosophical, or spiritual significance going on in the themes of this thing that might trigger some worthwhile thought or conversation? So far, rather than a central theme that's really stood out to me, I've been noticing a number of brief little moments that could be pondered or talked about, I think. The world is a matriarchy of sorts, although there is a patriarchal faction that is bad, to varying degrees. Some of the guys in that group don't seem like evil through and through, but there's definitely another subgroup within that patriarchal faction that is definitely evil. You know, and then you've got, but you do have this, so they're generally kind of bad, but you know, the matriarchal faction of magic using women, it does have its own varied internal moral corruption, some more so than others. And so it seems very far from an overly simplistic, like, feminist viewpoint being explored here. And so I appreciate the complexity of that. I mean, I think you could walk away from this and say, yeah, you know what, if we came from a largely matriarchal past instead of a patriarchal past in Western society, we'd still probably have basically the same mess of humanity and moral problems that we have today. You know, the ultimate good in this world, rather than like God, is the light. People are referencing, you know, like, thank the light, or, you know, light preserve me, you know, that kind of stuff. There's no clarity for me yet on whether or not the light is a person. It does seem to be living. It seems to be a little bit more in the direction of a person than, say, the Force from Star Wars. It's the way it's talked about. It seems to be living, at least metaphorically. Some revere the light as part of a seemingly strict and predictably evil religious order, and most others revere the light informally, yet still personally. They don't seem to just be giving lip service to that idea, many of them at least. So there may be some some interest there in like promoting, I don't know, spirituality that is not part of an organized religion, which is certainly a popular and appealing idea to a lot of people. But even in that, there may be some small and less formal institutions, things that could still be called loose institutions, that are connected to reverence or worship of the light, that are perhaps parallel to maybe loosely connected Christian denominations that we have in our world today, that de-emphasize tradition and church authority structures. It's too early in the series, really, for me to tell. Finally, in one moment, a character who follows a strong moral code of honesty deceives someone for a good reason, to help others and keep them from, all being killed, but then justifies her actions saying that she told the truth in the words that she used. It just wasn't the truth that the listeners thought they were hearing them say. But the character, I think, in seeing that scene, and maybe also the writer, doesn't seem to recognize that this sort of technical truth-telling is still done with the intent to deceive. Now, we can perhaps argue that it was justified here because of circumstances, but the character doesn't appeal to the greater good or to circumstances. They justify their actions by basically saying, oh, technically, if you paid attention to my words, technically, I did not speak any untruth, And I'm thinking to myself, if that's our measure of truth telling, we've got a serious problem here, So anyway, I think there's definitely some things that you could talk about and react to and think about there. All right, now I have no idea what your tastes are in movies or TV shows, but if I were a time traveler, I'd go back in time and say, Peter, oh man, since the Lord of the Rings trilogy, I have waded through trends of fantasy made mostly for kids and young adults, and then fantasy made for horny teenagers, and finally fantasy that brings porn to the living room, waiting for an epic fantasy film series or premium TV series to truly treat the genre with serious weight, and also without appealing to the worst in us in order to convince us to watch. I think this might be that series. There's interesting, well-motivated characters, including those in supporting roles. There's a morally complex world that asks me to sort through things myself instead of preaching at me really in a really obvious way. There's visible magic that is powerful and costly. There's evil that's dark, ominous, and freaking brutal when it makes its move. There are scenes that seem to be headed in one direction and then delightfully surprise my jaded heart with a left turn that I don't expect. This show is such a novelty compared to what I have come to expect, and it is working so well for me at the start that I am planning to hold off on watching more until the entire first season is released. And then I'm going to invite my wife to watch it with me because I think she'll really like it too. And while I wait, I can't believe I'm saying this, I think I'm going to give that first Wheel of Time book another try and see if I can look past the ornate doorknob descriptions to the other things that it may have to offer. This one is rated 16 plus on Amazon Prime for alcohol use, foul language, and violence. And those are all my thoughts for now on the Wheel of Time series premiere episodes 1 through 3. All right, those are my thoughts. I would love to get yours in the comments below. Please like, share, subscribe, and click that bell to stay connected. I want to thank the Spirit Blade Insiders for making so much of my content possible. You can get info about the benefits of joining over at patreon.com/spiritblade productions. Then, as always, I hope you'll join us soon as over at christiangeekcentral.com. Check out the Christian Geek Central podcast too while you're at it, as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. Hey, I wanted to let you know there are some dates below in the description of some live events coming up that you may not want to miss. And also, while I have your attention, check out my playlists to see some content that maybe you missed already that you'll be glad you found. That's all.